They have crossed the last line, and I am not letting this go. I have wanted to talk about this for such a long time. Have you guys noticed how soft games have gotten? Games that used to have an edge, that used to have personality, that used to have a very clear and distinct identity that have been sanded down to the point where I don't even know what they are anymore. It's everywhere. It's the mechanics, it's the difficulty, it's the way that characters talk, the language that they use, how they're designed, the themes that they explore, and the topics that they explore, pretty much across the board. In almost all forms of media, you're seeing this identity crisis where people have no idea who any of this stuff is being made for. And now we have games journalists that are coming out to make things worse, begging game developers to put an option into games, into mature-rated games, to make it where they can play it in front of their 7-year-old. Games that are intended for mature audiences and that are labeled as such need to be made child-safe. What are you doing? It's like this industry is being turned into a padded room. Everything needs to be made for everyone without any barriers, I guess. No barriers, no friction, no obstacles. Oh, you have a game that has a very specific and distinct audience? We can't have that. Oh, we have a game that might challenge or make people feel uncomfortable? Ooh, it's a bit touch and go, isn't it? I know we've seen this kind of discussion pop up around character design specifically, but that has always been a symptom of a much larger problem. And it's one that we are going to talk about today. But before that, a word from today's sponsor, Displate. They sent me a bunch more. Today's video is sponsored by Displate, and if you've been watching the rise of Expedition 33, then this is one you're going to want to check out. They just released their official Expedition 33 designs, and they all look incredible. The detail, the color, the atmosphere, it all translates beautifully to metal. I just got a few of them myself, and they are easily some of the cleanest looking displates I've ever put up. If you haven't used Displate before, Displate makes premium metal posters that mount magnetically, no tools, no frames, no wall damage, just stick a magnet to the wall, line it up, and that's it. Swapping them out only takes seconds, and the quality is always top tier. They've got over 1 million designs to choose from, everything from games, anime, and movie to tech and fantasy. That includes their textra prints that add depth and texture, plus their limited edition drops that don't get restocked once they're gone. Now, maybe you're looking for something a little bit more personal, and you can try out their custom displays feature where you can upload your own images. Maybe it's a family picture, and you can turn it into a perfect gift-worthy metal poster to give to somebody else. Use code LEGENDARY at checkout, hit the link in the description, and grab something that actually deserves a spot on your wall. I don't know exactly when this all started, but games used to have conviction. You could look at a game and instantly know who it was made for. No ambiguity, no identity crisis, just a clear vision executed without apology. Space Marine 2 reminded me of what that felt like, or better yet, what we had lost. It knew exactly what it was, a bloody, gory mess of a game intended for mature male audiences about stoic warriors who barely speak and show their loyalty through action rather than dialogue. Men acting like men, and it worked because it fully committed to that identity instead of hedging its bets, trying to appeal to everyone. But most games don't do this anymore because the industry has convinced itself that having a clear identity somehow makes games less accessible. And that's the word of the day here, accessibility. That term has changed so many games. The idea is simple enough, remove barriers so more players can play the games and enjoy these games. But the problem is that definition has been mutilated beyond all recognition and is now getting slapped onto anything that anybody wants changed. Accessibility is defined as the design of products, devices, services, vehicles, or environments to be usable by disabled people. I want you guys to keep that one in mind. Disabled people. That's it. I'm spelling that out right now because what's happening in the games industry has almost nothing to do with this definition anymore. Real accessibility removes unintentional barriers to experiencing a game as it was designed. Subtitles for deaf players, remappable controls for motor impairments, colorblind modes, UI scaling. None of these change what a game is, they just let more people reach it. But now, accessibility has been weaponized to justify gutting mechanics, lowering difficulty, sanitizing narratives, changing language, redesigning characters, demands that have nothing to do with disabilities and everything to do with remaking games for audiences that they were never intended for. The reason I'm bringing this up right now is because this has only continued to get worse as journalists are now calling for the ability to play mature-rated games in front of young children. Recently, Chris Scullion of VGC published an article titled, "Developers, please give me the option to remove swear words from your games. In the era of excellent accessibility options, parents should be able to play certain games in front of their children without reaching for the volume." He writes, last year I reviewed South of Midnight for VGC, and while I found its combat repetitive, I thought it was a beautiful adventure that featured a setting, characters, and subject matter that aren't frequently explored in this medium. Not only does it look and sound superb, but it has a strong female protagonist, and as someone with a young daughter, I figured it would be a great game to play while she was around. For context, my daughter was about to turn 7 years old when South of Midnight released, and yes, the game's age rating suggests that it wasn't suitable for her. I'm going to bring this up, by the way, for whatever reason the writer doesn't want to. The game is rated M, 17 up. But the aim wasn't to have her play, it was to make sure that it was safe for me to play in the background while she was in the room, and having played an hour or so for the game for a preview, I had a pretty good feel for what it was offering. Now, to save a little bit of time, he keeps going. He explains that he figured his daughter can handle a little bit of fantasy violence just fine. She'd be playing with her Disney figures on the floor and doing some coloring, no big deal. And he said, hey, if watching a woman kick ass in the background rubbed off on her, then even the better. But within the first 5 minutes, characters started swearing. He didn't think his kid heard it, but he ended up shutting off the game and waiting to play after she fell asleep. He then calls back to the same thing that had happened before with Avowed, another game with strong female characters, he makes sure to mention, that had the exact same problem, too much swearing, and he ended up having to turn it off. Notice how he keeps doing that every single time. All these games have strong female characters, like it's a stamp of approval, like he's using that to try to justify why these M-rated games should be safe for his 7-year-old. South of Midnight is rated M for mature. That means 17 plus. His daughter is 7. She is a decade away from being this game's intended audience. That rating exists specifically to tell him that this is not appropriate for children, and his response isn't, oh, well, maybe I should just play it when she's not around. No, his solution is that the game needs to change so he doesn't have to adjust his own behavior. Now, I love how he opens this response because he knows he is dropping the worst take possible. He says, before we go on, here's the paragraph that you can feel free to quote on social media when people inevitably moan at the headline of this article without actually reading it. In no way, shape, or form am I trying to say games should have their swearing removed or that content of the game should be compromised in any way for the people who want to play them unedited. He then goes on to clarify his stance, saying that he's not against swearing in games when it's used well, when it can deliver impact, humor, or fear. He is categorically in favor in the right circumstances. His actual request, a toggle option for games where swearing isn't actually necessary. He wants developers to provide an option to turn it off and create a secondary audio track and an XXX for subtitles. He admits that this wouldn't work for every game. Obviously, you can't sanitize GTA 6 or games entirely built around profanity, but for games like South of Midnight or Avowed, he thinks it's a reasonable ask that would make the difference between whether or not he could play the game with his family. Again, we are talking about games that are rated mature and not intended for all audiences. In his closing, he writes, ultimately, we live in a world where many developers are finally implementing a solid range of accessibility options to make their games playable for players with a myriad of conditions, disabilities, or any other situations which would otherwise prevent them from enjoying a game fully. We also live in a world where games like Grounded, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and Monster Hunter Wilds have arachnophobia modes for people who don't like encountering bugs in games. And there it is. That is exactly the problem that I am calling out right there. You do not have a disability. Having a kid is not a disability. You are not a part of those people. You are not a protected class. You are not being excluded, and nothing is being taken from you. The moment we start treating your parenting schedule like it's an accessibility failure, the entire concept becomes meaningless. And the lie that's at the center of this entire article is the claim that this does not compromise the game. It absolutely does on a fundamental level. The second you start asking for secondary audio tracks, sanitized subtitles, censored dialogue, you are asking these developers to make judgment calls based on which parts of their writing matter and which parts are disposable. Worse, you are the one that is making those calls for them. You are deciding what games do and don't need for whatever language you want or don't want in their games. You didn't write the script. You didn't make the game. Dude, the simple solution was there the entire time. Do not play these games while your kids are in the room. That is not oppression. That is adulthood. That M rating told you exactly what that game was, exactly who that game was for, and exactly who it wasn't for. Ignoring that and then framing it as the game being unreasonable is just an insane level of entitlement. You know, after reading this article, I feel like I'm the one that needs some accessibility options now. Now, I want to make this clear. This is not just one bad take. I have seen enough arguments like this enough times to know that this is intentional and also see the amount of damage that it's done. Look across the games industry, especially when it comes to major franchises. You can constantly see the softening of edges, and it's because these companies are bending to an audience that doesn't exist. They're bending to arguments coming from people that don't represent anybody. You know what irritates me the most is that this guy couldn't even see the forest through the trees. The entire time he's talking about strong female characters, blinded by it, without realizing that there's a trend there. That these games are constantly relying on swearing because their writing is so weak. It's not that female characters are the problem, it's that the writing is shallow, so these guys are trying to manufacture maturity and impact through cursing all the time. It's just bad writing. Am I really the superior journalist here? Is that what's going on? I'm immediately reminded of Forspoken. That game did that so much and it was so blatant. How do you not see that? Accessibility needs to be protected from these people. It does not belong to them. It is not for you. It is for people that have genuine obstacles in life, a much harder life than you have. And you're trying to reappropriate that for yourself, pretend like you are disabled in some way. That is definitely not the case. And it's disgusting to me that people want to take this and make it their own. You don't belong there, okay? You don't belong there. This is why people are sick and tired. I hope people understand that. Because this isn't about, it's not about inclusivity. It's not about accessibility. It's everything has to bend. Everything has to soften. Everything has to be made for everyone. And that doesn't matter in the face of warning labels. These guys will just ignore it entirely. And doing that, you know, at some point, the answer just has to be no. You cannot have it your way. This game is not made for you. This game has a different audience, a different intended audience, a different way to play that you're just not going to be able to get anywhere else. And in some cases, even in the cases of disability, sorry, sometimes these games just can't be made so that you can play them. But not a lot of these guys want to put their foot down like that. And when you have all of these games that constantly try to bend and adjust themselves to everyone, they just lose themselves. And we see it all the time. This whole thing reminds me of the exact same drama that we saw around Alana Pierce when she had argued that Elden Ring needs to have a pause screen, and she was going as far to say that developers effectively treat parents as situationally disabled. And I get that she's not literally saying that parents are disabled, but the framing is the problem. They're being discussed as if they are disabled, and that's just fucking absurd to me. The question then came up, well, what happens if the baby is crying? What happens if your kid hits their head? Well, you just put the controller down and you go deal with it. If you lose progress, it is what it is. That's life. That's just the way things go. Not every single experience needs to be built to protect you from circumstance, responsibility, or friction. Now, sure, you're allowed to have an opinion on whether or not you think games should have a pause menu or not, but From Software very deliberately chose not to include one, and they did it for a reason. They want you to not feel safe while playing their games. They want rest to feel earned. You might think that adding a pause button wouldn't take anything away, but they clearly do, and I'm right there with them, or I'm at least going to respect what they say because, well, having the option to pause whenever you want does completely break immersion. It reminds you that you're playing a game. It pulls you out of the moment, and it entirely kills tension. And honestly, given how consistently good their games are, I'm going to side with the creative vision over the parent that is worried about losing their progress after stepping away. The world does not need to bend to your life. Sometimes you just need to step away from the game. Actually, speaking of From Software, their games always seem to be the center of a lot of these accessibility arguments, and they always show up every single time they have a new game come out. The same conversation crawls its way back out. Difficulty. Who is the game made for? Who is it supposed to leave behind? When Elden Ring first launched, Wired ran an article that was titled, "Elden Ring Isn't Made for All Gamers. I Wish It Were," framing the lack of difficulty options like it was some kind of design failure. And what's always been really funny to me about that conversation is that the challenge is the point. Difficulty in From Software games isn't an oversight, it's half the experience. These games are about overcoming something that feels like it's impossible, about what it feels like to be just a guy standing in front of a god and somehow scraping by. That imbalance, that tension, that sense of earned progress is why finishing these games feels like a genuine accomplishment. And people want to sand that down because of empathy for a hypothetical audience that matters more than respecting the actual experience itself and the people that are already playing that game. What are you guys doing? What's wild is From Software already has the smartest accessibility design in the industry. They just don't dress it up as a menu toggle. They don't use difficulty sliders because the player is the difficulty slider. You can use magic, range build, summon spirits, co-op. You can overlevel, you can respec, and I do all that stuff all the time. If I hit a wall, I leave, I grind, I change my build, I listen to the game and what it's telling me, and instead of assuming that it's the game that's the problem for pushing back. Honestly, the more that I think about it, difficulty might be the most butchered part of modern game design, and it's all in the name of accessibility. There are some fair critiques to make, absurd boss runbacks like in Silksong that definitely deserve some criticism, but challenge itself, that has been stripped out of so many games. There's not a lot of games that make you lock in anymore, and from where I'm standing, that is the game feel. That's the interaction. That's the friction that gives your actions weight. Strip that away, and you're left with a game that technically functions, but is almost completely empty. I remember when I was playing Doom the Dark Ages, yeah, the game looked good and it ran well, but the difficulty was almost entirely on the player. Yes, they had default options for difficulties, but that's not what the game was balanced around. It was balanced around all the endless sliders and dials and settings and modifiers that you could change for the difficulty. You could reshape the experience however you wanted to, which sounds great on paper, but it makes the game feel like the developers had no idea how it was actually supposed to play. Their whole marketing push for the game was around how it was the most accessible Doom ever, and the moment that that mentality takes over, the game starts to lose its identity. I mean, this bled into everything. They had map keys that literally had spotlights on them. Secrets were marked on the map with question marks. Secrets. How are you supposed to be calling them secrets at that point if you're pointing right at them? At that point, you're not even exploring the game anymore. You're just following a GPS. Nothing feels earned in a game like that because they're not letting you miss anything. Everything's been smoothed down to make sure that everybody experiences everything, and then you're just left with just this empty feeling. I'm telling you guys right now, this is the real issue. Instead of making games simpler, watering down mechanics, or flattening the challenge, developers should be focusing on better communication, better tutorials, teaching players how systems work, and then trusting them to use what they've learned. Because what's happening right now is that these games are being made easier, less demanding, and less mechanically interesting. Not as a natural design choice, but instead as a reach tactic. I hate to have to keep using this game, but holy hell, was Dragon Age the Veilguard the best case study for nearly everything that has gone wrong for modern games. And especially in this conversation, that game was obliterated beyond recognition, all in the name of accessibility and widening its potential audience. Real-time with pause combat was stripped out of the game because it was deemed too complicated for modern audiences, and then it was replaced with basically a two-button mobile combat system that's no different than we see in most gacha games. It's the same elemental reaction system that they pulled straight out of Genshin Impact, and the result wasn't more approachable, it was just dull. And of course, that didn't stop at mechanics. The writing got sanded down too. You couldn't be cruel, you couldn't be confrontational, you couldn't even be rude to people. In a fantasy RPG, a genre that is literally built around moral choice and consequence, in a series that is entirely dependent on social dynamics, and the harshest thing that you can say is basically, I disagree, but okay. Because that game was so terrified of offending anyone. That's why I hate what's happened to the word accessibility. At this point, it barely even describes a design choice anymore. Now it's a social position. Invoke it, and suddenly this isn't a difference of opinion, it's a moral failure. What, you don't want games to be accessible now? That's how these conversations get poisoned. I mean, now this stuff is even being applied to narratives and character designs in a way that is just deranged to me. Gender, identity, skin color, all of it is getting implicitly framed as some kind of barrier to play, as if those traits are functioning as disabilities that need to be designed around. That is so patronizing and offensive. It is training writers and developers to prioritize optics over characters, messaging over personality, and it explains exactly why so many of these games just suck. Of course, all of this stuff just comes back to money, because that's the root of all evil when it comes to a lot of these discussions. These companies who convince themselves that this is the way to be able to reach wider audiences, and it just backfires on these guys every single time. You end up making games worse for the people that actually play them in hopes of attracting an audience of people that were never going to buy them anyway. Those core players then bounce, they talk about why the game feels bad, and the only thing that anybody ever hears about these games is negativity. So the audiences that you were still chasing don't show up, and the audience you already had walked away. I know that this is a conversation that probably a lot of people don't really feel comfortable talking about. And I think it has to be called out. I don't think that I can back down from something like this. I think far too often these kind of points and these kind of topics go unchallenged by a clear voice that is not swayed by extremes. That's the best way for me to be able to put it. This is not a conversation about ideology. This is not a conversation about personal beliefs or anything else. This is a conversation about quality. And there's been a severe drop in quality pretty much across the board. And I think it's because the idea of accessibility has been mutilated. It has been brutalized to the point where it has become the source of frustration for a lot of players and the loss of identity for a lot of games. Not every game needs to be made for everyone. Not every game can be made for every person. And also on top of that, none of these games should be trying to do that in the first place. The only thing that they should be worried about is trying to be the best that they are at the thing that they do, at the kind of experience that they're trying to deliver. Could you guys imagine playing a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, where they had the language censored, where they had the racism taken out, where they had the violence removed? Well, you could make the argument that those things aren't necessary to the plot or the gameplay, which maybe you could be right about. At the same time, you're just going to completely ruin the flavor. You're going to remove the flavor from the game, which is going to, at the end, completely destroy the emotional payoff of finishing the game. I don't think that's what a lot of people realize. It's chip damage. Eventually, you're just going to take enough from these games to the point where whatever's left is flavorless. Accessibility is for the people that actually need it, not for the people that are trying to misappropriate it. That's one key thing that I really want to be taken from this conversation, because it's the one thing that bothers me the most, is because the conversation isn't focused on the people that actually need it. What these games do need is they need a quality rework from the ground up. They need to be made just better pretty much across the board. Stop trying to solve issues in your games by making your games easier. Make your games more informative or more intuitive. And honestly, I think that's what we're going to end up getting. Because if you look pretty much across the board, especially when it comes to AAA games where this problem ends up being the most prolific, these guys have had a lot of troubles over the past couple of years. They have lost a lot of money chasing the dragon that they have been chasing. And eventually, they're going to have to wake up or they're going to go out of business. So we're going to win either way. We're either going to get better games or those guys are going to go away and they're going to make more room for better competition that are going to give us exactly what we want, which is exactly what we want. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you guys think I'm crazy? Am I imagining this? Is that what's going on right now? Because at least from where I'm standing right now, I feel like so much has been gutted from so many games. I do. And it's getting to the point now where the contrast is just impossible to ignore with a lot of these games. I miss the days where it felt like nearly every single game I played was fulfilling. Now it's pretty much hit or miss, unless it's indie, obviously. But nowadays, it's pretty much hit or miss. I want to go back to the days where it felt like every single time I bought a game, damn, that game was worth it. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did enjoy the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, share it on social media, follow me on Twitch, follow me on Twitter, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. Peace. Oh, also, follow the community Discord. Link is in the description.
Family, 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 family.